Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 29th September 2017. The first article, the activist and the intellectual. Now here we often use these terms interchangeably, but there are fine differences between the two. An activist is a moral agent and he strives for a change and change through action. And to become an activist is relatively easy because he justifies his actions based on morality, and you don't need great education or academic pursuit to become an activist. But having an academic background, it gives a strong conviction on his work to an activist. On the other hand, an intellectual is in search of an academic pursuit and he tries to give a perspective to the society and he tries to bring in social change through the knowledge which he gives to the society. Activism is more democratic and egalitarian. It means that any person who has got a strong moral bent of mind, strong sense of purpose towards changing the lives of the others can become an activist. But to become an intellectual, one needs deep or in-depth education and pursuit of the knowledge. It means he needs a good schooling and he shall have strong academics to become an intellectual. An activist action is more fundamentally a moral action. Intellectual action is concerned with information and knowledge. An activist works with poor and marginalized. An intellectual may see the poor and marginalized from a different perspective. An activist tries to give up something towards the change he believes in. But it is not the case with the intellectual. Simply said, an activist is a moral agent and he tries to bring in social change through activism. An intellectual provides a perspective and he tries to bring in the social change through knowledge and information he supplies to the society. When they work together, when their work overlaps, that is a definite medicine for the change. But many a times there will be a mistrust between these two. An activist sees intellectual as an armchair advisor. An intellectual sees activist is one who is with lot of energy but with no proper direction. But however, their working together is very essential for today's society. The two big evils of today's society, according to the author, are power and profit. So to counter these two, we need these two working, that is activist and the intellectual. And if any society is trying to silence them, obviously it means that the society is moving backwards rather than forward. And if a society is losing its consciousness, its morals and ethos, then the activist has to emerge to regrain the society with them. Now, expanding the common ground. It is about India-USA relations. The common ground between India and USA is increasing, especially if you see the Mr. Trump's South Asian policy. Vis-a-vis Afghanistan, he has expected a greater role for India. He wants India to have a developmental role, an economic role in the Afghanistan. On the other hand, Pakistan says that India has no political or military role in Afghanistan. And second aspect is, Pakistan and its safe havens were criticized by the President Trump. And recently, Foreign Minister of Pakistan also has clearly called Hafiz Saeed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, these are the liabilities of the Pakistan. And second aspect of this is, India-USA defense cooperation is also increasing. India is the first country outside the allies to which US has supplied unmanned aerial vehicles. As the Chinese might is increasing in Asia Pacific, US is expecting a greater role for India on the global commons. India's Act East policy is also syncing with US policy to the Southeast Asia and East Asia. So that's why a greater convergence is growing on the global issues. That's what this article talks about. Hope in Darjeeling. Now if you take Darjeeling, so there is a blockade for 104 days in Darjeeling. And a separate state movement is still active out over there. How it has started, this spell has started. Ms. Mamata Banerjee, Chief Minister of West Bengal, she called for Bengali as a language in all the schools. And this has led to an agitation in Darjeeling. Slowly, it has increased in its scope for a separate state demand. So, the way forward for this, the permanent solution can lie in talks, and in the meanwhile, the Gorkhaland Territorial Administration, it has to be given greater autonomy to manage the affairs of the hill people in West Bengal. So, giving greater autonomy and giving real powers to Gorkhaland Territorial Administration is the way forward which we have to look at. Tokyo Dreams. Now, remember, Japan is the only country which has a pacifist constitution. It means Japan denounces war. It was a post-World War II constitution, or also called MacArthur Constitution, in the name of the American General MacArthur. So, now, in the changed global scenario, Japan wants to shun this pacifist constitution and move towards a more aggressive constitution. And a section of the people, especially old generation, who are the victims of war and who have got the first experience of war, they are not willing for this change. And second aspect of this is, Japan has deep fears with regard to nuclear energy, and Mr. Shinzo Abe is actively pushing the nuclear cooperation with countries such as India. So now, Shinzo Abe has announced snapfalls to Diet, the lower house in Japan, and he wants to gain the legitimacy to change the constitution. And opposition leader is mayor of Tokyo, and we don't get into the local politics of Japan, but from global geopolitical dimension, Japan wants to shun its pacifist constitution. In this term already, Shinzo Abe's government has took certain steps where Japan has expressed its willingness to help or cooperate the friends who are facing a problems from the outsider or aggression from the outsider. So this is what is the article is about. Now let's get into the article open at page. That is, will Swachh Bharat Abhiyan be a success? Now, previously Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan was there. Modi government has changed the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan to Swachh Bharat Abhiyan with change in goals. Remember, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan dashboard, if you observe, there is a huge construction spree of the toilets and open defecation free villages and states are being declared. That has been projected as the success of the Swachh Bharat. But if Swachh Bharat has to be successful, few other things are very much important. The cleanliness is a well-connected action. It is not just defecation, solid waste management, sewerage management, drinking water, all these are connected to each other with regard to the cleanliness. So this connect has to be established. And second aspect of this is, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has to focus on urban areas too. When we talk about the rural areas, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is majorly confined there. But however, as the population of the urban areas are increasing, this program has to allocate funds to the urban areas too. And then, the behavioral change is very critical for the success of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Because open defecation is not due to just the availability of toilets. It is also due to a mindset. So this has to change. For this to happen, information, education and communication has to be given more importance. And the Swachh Bharat will not be successful without separating the occupation and the caste in India. Because the people who are maintaining the cleanliness, manual scavengers, their plight is to be changed. So it means mechanization has to come up with regard to the management of the sewerages in India, and manual scavenging has to go away from India so that India to become really clean. These are the points which are being spoken over here. Now, let's get next page, the news page. FM urges CPSCs to spend aggressively. So now, yesterday Yashwant Sinha, the former finance minister, has made a comment that India's economic growth is receding And if you go by the world statistics, it is not even 5.7%. It will be around 3.7% the GDP growth of India is. So it's really a nightmare to any finance minister. And the fall in this growth, a rise in unemployment, rising inflation, these and fall in demand, these are a nightmare, a vicious cycle which is forming. So most of these can be criticized due to demonetization and announcement of GST, a poorly planned GST are cited as the reasons. And government claims that these are more structural reforms it is working on. And opposition has clarified that administrative changes cannot be called as structural reforms. Now let us see clearly the four engines of the economic growth. What are they? One is export growth. Next is private investments, public investments, and then consumption or consumer demand. These are the four engines of growth. So export growth, due to strong rupee, export growth is less. We do not have a rise in exports, and in spite of revival of the global demand, Indian export growth is not substantial. The private investments are not picking up. The bank credit growth is very poor. So that's why finance minister is pitching for the greater growth with regard to the central public sector and enterprises. He wants CPSCs to aggressively have a capital expenditure so that the public investment is trying to revive the economy. And consumer demand has fallen because of introduction of the GST to an extent and also to the demonetization effect which have worst affected the unorganized sector in India. So the economy is in doldrums for sure. Now, the reforms which are being taken up by the government they are expected to show results in very time soon. As they are expected to show results soon, we can expect a revival of the economy too. And the government is also looking for a stimulus package to revive the economy. Let us see them further. And then in the last page, I gave you the notes which will be available to you at laix.in/civils prep. Thank you very much and all the best.